Okay, this is a shorter version of the 30-minute, 45-minute long documentary I said earlier. So we're just going to skim over everything in the review slides, go over how the judiciary is set up, and that'll be it. Because this test is only over the judiciary. We should get 80s, 90s on this. First one is civil liberties. These are the Bill of Rights. These are liberties that every U.S. citizen has. Clear and present danger. If your speech causes clear and present danger, for example, if I were to yell that there was a bomb in a school, or if I was to yell I was going to shoot up the school, that presents clear and present danger. That is not protected under the First Amendment. Defamation. This is when you say something to defame someone into losing a career. For example, if you say something about an artist and they lose their career because of it, that's defamation. If it was false, it would be defamation. The Establishment Clause. This establishes a barrier between church and state. The Free Exercise Clause. This says that the government cannot do anything to impede on a person's ability to practice their religion. The Lemon Test. This is a test to see if the government is truly impeding on your religion. This is the test that says, is the government stepping over the Free Exercise Clause? So if they pass the Lemon Test, that means the Free Exercise Clause was not gone over, and the law that the state was making did not impede on the religious practice. Prior restraint. This is when the government stops publications or holds them back from saying whatever. If they don't want something to go, if they don't want a newspaper to publish it, they can use prior restraint in some cases. Selective incorporation. This is the incorporation of amendments from the Bill of Rights to the citizens of states. That is what most of the court cases are about. Symbolic speech. I'll come back to that one. Slander is when you say something untrue about someone that is against their character. So if I were to say that a basketball player was cheating on his wife when he wasn't, that would be slander. Obscenity is cursing. It is things that are obscene to the public view. So if you're yelling slurs at someone, that's not truly protected by the First Amendment. Libel is written slander. The 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, first, makes every citizen born in the United States, not every person born in the United States, and or born with one of their parents being an American citizen, they are automatically citizens. The second, and I shouldn't say more important, but the second thing that it does that we focus more on is it said that the state cannot make any law that impedes on the civil liberties granted by the Bill of Rights. Not the Bill of Rights, but the state cannot make any law that goes against the civil liberties of citizens. So if I owned a house and the government was taking my land, the state government, and they were using it and they weren't paying me because of the 14th Amendment, I would say, hey, you're impeding on my civil liberty, you have to pay me for that land. Without the 14th Amendment, the states can do whatever they want because the Bill of Rights protected the citizens from the federal government, not the state's government. Eminent domain. Eminent domain is when the government pays for private land. Private land used for public. But the government has to pay the person to use it. Double jeopardy. You cannot be convicted of the same crime twice. So if I were to crash my car deliberately into a child and I was found innocent, I can't be tried again. Now we'll get into the court cases. New York Times versus U.S. What I said earlier about prior restraint, the government holding back publications, this said that this was like a check against prior restraint. They favored for New York Times, saying that the U.S. can't restrict most speech. So they were leaking the Pentagon Papers, and they had the ability to leak them. Bethel versus Frazier. This is the firm speech. This says that schools can limit government, that the schools, if you're in a school zone, your speech can be censored by the school. Engel versus Vitale. This prohibits the prayer in school, and it establishes the Establishment Clause. Wisconsin versus Yoder. This is when the Amish didn't want to send their kids to school. They said it was impeding on their religion, and courts favored for Yoder, for the Amish. That would be the free exercise clause. The government cannot impede on someone's ability to practice their religion. Kennedy versus Remington. Let me look that one up real quick. Is this? Okay. Oh, so this is the coach who was praying on the field. Because he was out of school times, he still has the freedom of speech. He still has that ability because he's not being paid he's not on school hours. He's able to use the freedom of speech. Schenck versus United States. This is when Schenck was mailing out letters to draft-aged young men saying how to rebel against the draft. And this is associated with the clear and present danger and libel, slander, stuff like that. It's saying not all speech is protected by the First Amendment. How you would remember this: Schenck, if you're near Schenck, you're in clear and present danger. Clear and present danger. If your speech causes clear and present danger, if I yell fire, then yeah, it's not protected. Tinker versus Des Moines. This one said that when you enter the school building, you do not lose your First Amendment right. So the schools cannot restrict all your First Amendment right. Morse versus Frederick. This is the bong hits for Jesus. If you remember that, they favored in for the school, saying, let me make sure it is. Yeah, this bong hits for Jesus. They said they had to make sure that schools can prohibit students from displaying images that prohibit or promote illegal drug use. So the schools can censor that. Texas versus Johnson. This made flag burning legal. Burrell versus Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby didn't want to pay for birth control for their workers because Hobby Lobby is a Christian company. So under the Free Exercise Act, the government can't impede on your ability to practice your religion. They didn't have to pay for it. Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer. This is where prior restraint comes in. You have to link the vocab word to the court case. Hazelwood, prior restraint. School board held back. The school held back the newspaper because they didn't like the things being said. And in a school zone, that's allowed. New Jersey versus TLO. TLO was the drug dealer. And this one is that the schools only need reasonable suspicion to check your bags. TLO, reasonable suspicion in schools. Gideon v. Wainwright. Gideon v. Wainwright was this old man, he couldn't afford a lawyer. So this one is everybody has to get a lawyer, has to get a counsel. This is the fifth. This is the, let me look it up. I think it's the Sixth Amendment. I think it's the Sixth Amendment. Yes, it is the Sixth Amendment. So it's incorporating the Sixth Amendment for the Bill of Rights to the states. So everyone needs a lawyer. Mapp versus Ohio. This is the pornography case. It says that anything found illegally cannot be used as evidence. Miranda versus Arizona. This is when Miranda was arrested, but he wasn't read his rights. So now you have to read the Miranda rights to people when you arrest them. Their list of rights that they have when they get arrested. McDonald versus Chicago. This incorporated the Second Amendment to the states. So the Second Amendment was incorporated from the Bill of Rights and now is subjected to the states. Brown v. Board of Education. This said that separate was not equal. Separate was not equal in a desegregated schools. Bollinger versus Grutter. This Bollinger versus Grutter and Bake versus California is just affirmative action. These are affirmative action cases. I think we've heard so much about affirmative action in the news, but a quick recap of it is taking race into account when you're hiring for jobs or when you're getting into college, usually to help minorities who have been, I don't know what to say, that have been discriminated against in the past. Barron versus Baltimore. This is a case in the 1880s. This is before the 14th Amendment. So Baltimore was stealing Barron's land, and under the Bill of Rights, Baltimore had to pay him eminent domain. But since the Bill of Rights is only for the federal government, the states didn't need to do that. It set the precedent that the Bill of Rights was only for the federal government and not the state government. Until the 14th Amendment said that the states cannot make a law to impede on the civil liberties that were granted to each United States citizen. A letter from our Birmingham jail. This is very important. This is to show that we are still growing as a nation, that we are still reaching for those ideals, and then not everything is perfect. Not everything is set in stone. We've always looked at the ideal versus reality, and the Birmingham jail is just a representation of that. The ideal versus reality. And also the fact that America is still moving forward. There's still injustice in America, and America is able to grow and evolve. A warrant. A warrant is something that a judge commissions for police officers to go search. Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Acts of 65. Civil Rights Acts of 64. This prohibits race playing a part in job applications or in school. Voting Rights Act of 1965. This is when people went down to the South and they tried to register more black voters. Affirmative action. I went over this. Civil rights. These civil rights are protections from discrimination as a member of a particular group. So these would be usually minorities. A grand jury. That's just the 12 jury members. A social movement. I think we know what a social movement is. Separate but equal doctrine. This was set in by Plessy versus Ferguson, but overturned by Brown v. Board. Probable cause. If you're searching without a warrant, you need probable cause. So I think I gave this analogy in the video that don't watch it because it's way too long. But if I walk out of a candy store and I didn't pay for anything and I have a Hershey bar in print in my pocket and half the wrapper's coming out and I didn't have that before I went in, that's probable cause for an officer to say, hey, put it back, you stole it. Reasonable suspicion. This is used in schools. Link reasonable suspicion to Tia Lo. They needed reasonable suspicion to say that she had weed, she had cigarettes in her bag. You don't need probable cause, you just need reasonable suspicion. Title IX of the Education Act. This is equaling men and women in their opportunities. The due process clause. This is everyone gets a due process. That means speedy trial, all that jazz. Protected by the Sixth Amendment. De jure segregation is a segregation by law. De facto is segregation by culture, by practice. And then precedent is when the Supreme Court makes a law, it sets a precedent for all the other cases. So when they made Roe v. Wade, when they said Roe v. Wade, the precedent is that abortion was legal, that everybody could follow abortion. That's the precedent, and all the states had to follow it. But when they overturned it, the precedent changed into saying that it's a state issue. All right, that is most of the vocab. I'll probably make a second video going more in depth on the original versus the appellate.